One of the privileges of being a United States Senator is that we have the opportunity to meet extraordinary people every day. Whether you're the senator from Illinois or the senator from Nebraska, extraordinary people walk through our door every day of the week. But sometimes, Madam President, we get to meet amazing individuals that we can honestly call heroes. Heroes that lay their life on the line for their country and sacrifice themselves for our freedom. Master Sergeant Brendan O'Connor, a medic in the 7th Special Forces Group, is one of those very special people. In June 2006, Master Sergeant O'Connor was deployed to Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. His group was stationed near Kandahar and in charge of a variety of things, including security, training of Afghan army, and counterterrorism operations against a ruthless enemy. Mr. President, we've all heard news reports and heard of suicide bombers driving cars loaded with explosives into markets and crowded areas, killing innocent men, women, and children. We've all heard accounts of suicide bombers strapping explosives to their waists and walking through a market, intentionally killing individuals. All of these individuals have been branded as religious zealots, willing to die for their cause. However, Madam President, that's not always the case. Oftentimes, these Taliban warlords recruit suicide bombers in other ways. They go into small villages, and they hold the whole family hostage. And they instruct the young men in the family that if they don't carry out a suicide mission, they're going to kill the rest of the family, or if they do, they're going to let them live. Brendan's team was tracking one of these Taliban warlords, one of these thugs outside of Kandahar that was notorious for this type of recruitment. They tracked the terrorist to small farming villages surrounding the vineyards and orchards. Once in an area, Brendan's team set up a perimeter and defensive positions to root out these warlords. They arrived late one evening and, working under the cloak of darkness, proceeded to sweep a village, hoping to surprise the local Taliban leader. However, their arrival was tipped off to the Taliban, and they had fled just minutes before U.S. soldiers arrived. Having found evidence of Taliban's existence, the soldiers knew it was only a matter of time before they engaged the enemy. That first skirmish started the next day at dusk. Brendan's team, about 70 soldiers comprised of 8 U.S. Special Ops and 60 Afghan soldiers, took some small arms and rocket-propelled grenade fire, but it didn't last long. The Taliban attacked, and the U.S.-led forces several more times over the next day and night, but never amounting to much. The U.S.-led forces didn't even sustain a single injury during that firefight. After having arrived on Wednesday evening and sporadically fighting the Taliban for 2 days, Brendan's team decided it was time to take the fight to the enemy. On that Saturday, Master Sergeant Tom Mahalik led a small recon group to a Taliban stronghold which was just outside the village in a cluster of farm buildings. The team was comprised of 4 Special Ops forces and a dozen Afghan Army. Sergeant Mahalik was able to get in close enough to the compound without being detected. Once he assessed the situation, Sergeant Mahalik thought he could take the compound with a simple recon team. He ordered 2 of his soldiers, Staff Sergeant Matt Binney and Staff Sergeant Joe First, to take a fire suppression position and cover Sergeant Mahalik and the remaining Afghan Army contingent while they stormed the compound. When the U.S.-led recon team launched its first attack on the Taliban compound, they were quickly greeted with heavy machine gun fire. The first fire suppression team returned fire. However, the machine gun nested had a tactical advantage over the fire team. They had the higher ground. Matt was struck first by a bullet that grazed his neck and stunned him for a moment. Matt regained his senses, and he and Joe returned fire as much as they could, but the Taliban had him pinned down. Then an RPG round came and struck Staff Sergeant First directly in the leg. Didn't explode, thankfully, but badly wounded was Staff Sergeant Joe First. As Staff Sergeant Benny was tending to Joe's leg, he was shot through the shoulder. The only thing left of the fire suppression team was a young Afghan interpreter that had stayed with him. Master Sergeant Mahalik was cut off from Sergeant Benny and Staff Sergeant First, so he radioed for help. Back at the main perimeter, Brendan O'Connor got the call and put a team together to go get his wounded soldiers. When Brendan's team got to the area, the Taliban had taken positions along the route into the wounded soldiers, leaving Brendan only one path, an exposed field, to get to the wounded soldiers. Brendan instructed his team to take up positions, to support the wounded, and started on his mission to save the lives of these soldiers. At first, Brendan started crawling through an open field with his gear on. He quickly realized this wasn't going to work. So under a hail of small arms, RPG, and machine gun fire, Brendan removed all his armor, crawled through an open field to get to the two wounded. Brendan couldn't locate the two soldiers by sight, only by calling, and as he heard them, he would get closer and closer. When he arrived at the two wounded, he had to make a quick decision about Joe's injuries, which were life-threatening. Brendan quickly got Staff Sergeant Benny taken care of and instructed him to crawl through a culvert to get to safety. Staff Sergeant First wasn't so easy. He was unconscious and unable to move. Brendan pulled him down as far as he could into the culvert. He started to drag him, but he realized he couldn't drag him the entire way. Mr. President, as if Brendan and his team's actions weren't heroic enough at this point, the next part of this account will send chills down your spine. This time, during the fight, it was estimated that nearly 300 Taliban fighters had engaged the approximately 15-member U.S. force. 300. I say approximately because several Afghan Army members that originally accompanied Brendan's team had fled by this point. As Brendan's natural cover was coming to an end, he pulled Joe onto his shoulder and he ran across an area while 300 Taliban fighters were shooting at him. God was watching Brendan that day. God saw one man risk his life to save another. And God saw fit to keep Brendan from harm as he carried a wounded United States soldier to safety. Unfortunately, Madam President, Joe First died soon after Brendan got him back because of a massive blood loss. Staff Sergeant Matt Benny survived because of Brendan's leadership and courage under fire. The battle that had gone on for nearly 3 days was coming to an end at this point. The U.S. forces had air support which escorted them out of the area. All told, the U.S.-led force killed 125 Taliban fighters and only lost 2 of their own with 1 wounded. They weren't able to capture or kill the warlord that time. However, due to the losses to the Taliban that day, in that strike, U.S. forces got him several weeks later. For their heroics in combat, Master Sergeant Tom Mahalik and Staff Sergeant Matt Benny were awarded the Silver Star. Staff Sergeant Joe First was awarded the Bronze Star. Brendan O'Connor was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his valor. It was the first time a member of the 7th Special Force Group had been awarded the medal since 1964. It's an honor to have Brendan and his family in Washington today. He's joined by his beautiful wife, Meg, their children, Ryan, Colin, Darby, and Dylan. Mr. President, it's this type of story that we rarely hear about on the nightly news. But this story was so amazing that 60 Minutes felt compelled to do a piece on it after the soldiers arrived back home. Madam President, Master Sergeant Brendan O'Connor is a person who other warriors that have proudly served this country hold in their highest regard. He's a soldier that truly understands the price of freedom. The United States Senate salutes Master Sergeant Brendan O'Connor today. I thank the President. I yield the floor.